Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. This episode will be going over the changes that are coming in Cataclysm Classic, why it's actually good for the game, and why is so many people upset about Cataclysm coming to Wrath, as the next expansion for Wrath the Lich King Classic, because it's been looked down upon quite a lot, and I think some things are, understandable, but other points that have been made are just a bit silly in my honest opinion. But we'll get into that in a second. We'll start off with the weekly news as always. Liskanoth, Zakali Elders, and Aerostar? Aerostar? I go with Aerostar. Aerostar are your weekly world bosses for the week, located in their zones, which are not Azure Span. It is Thaldraszus. The Kali Elders are located in the Zaralak Caverns, and Aerostar is located in Emerald Dream. Dragonflight dungeons are your bonus event for the week. You get an extra piece of gear per dungeon that you do. Gravity Lapse is your brawl for the week. Essentially, this is where you play in Eye of the Storm, and every 30 seconds you are sent flying into the air. After this, you are descending at a rapid pace, and you also have a speed boost increase that's giving you some forward momentum. You can land relatively across the opposite side of the map if you really wanted to. Storming, Raging, and Tyrannical are your mythic fixes for the week. Storming, there's little vortexes that are going around, just sidestep them, move away from them. Raging, when a mob gets below 30%, it has 100% increased damage. Either soothe it, kite it, or CC it. Help out your tanks, help out your healers. And Tyrannical, the bosses and the mobs that they summon have increased health and damage, so bring a talent build that can accommodate for that. So, what changes do come in Cataclysm? There are a lot of big changes, essentially. The big changes come with a lot of the class rejigging, so to speak. We do get, obviously, a couple new factions, which are Worgen and Goblin, but we're not going to really go into them. The first change is class/race combinations. So you can be a gnome priest. You can be a human hunter. Yes, that can be a thing. Yes, you can be a human hunter. You can be a night elf mage. So many different class/race combinations. If you want to switch your main and stuff, you're more than welcome to do so. Now, with this being said, a lot of the classes do get their core, the core of them essentially changed in terms of how they're utilized and played. So for hunters, you now no longer have mana in Cataclysm. Instead, you have the resource known as Focus. This is what it is currently in retail. Focus essentially is you have 100 of it, and you need 50 focus to use Kill Command, or 50 focus to use Kill Shot, that kind of thing. So that is your resource that you have to manage instead of mana this time. Mana just never made sense to me for a hunter, because you are making use of aiming down your sights, and I don't know, it just doesn't, from a role-playing perspective, it really didn't sit right with me for mana. But they did try focus, actually, a little bit of info for you here. They did try using focus in beta, in the beta version of World of Warcraft for hunters, but the thing is, to regenerate your focus, you had to stand still fully, and this didn't go well with a lot of the mechanics in raids and stuff like that, or PvP. It would have been absolutely shambles. So they kind of scrapped it and they put it back in Cataclysm when they managed to figure it out, which is really good in my honest opinion. There is a talent squish. So the talents as we know them, you have about 60 talent points that you spend. They are squishing it down to 31, I believe, and with this they squish the talents into basically a smaller, more compact talent tree, kind of like back in Classic, but you actually get less talent points than what you did in Classic. You got 50? No. You got 40? No. You got 50. Yeah, you got 51 in Classic, 61 in TBC, and then 71 in Wrath, actually. So you get a shit ton, but they are cutting it down and they're squishing the talent trees to accommodate for this, for obvious reasons. The main one being that if they just kept adding layers and layers and like lower down on talent trees, we would at this point in retail be to about 20 lines worth of talents. And that's no fun. That you're scrolling down, you're having to move one talent point that's really far down, and then it has to, it fucks up the rest of the talent tree and, all of that stuff. It wasn't great fun. Dual specialization, it currently costs 1,000 gold in the game. When Cataclysm hits, it goes down to 10 gold. So make sure that you're not buying the dual specs just yet. You wait until Cataclysm pre-patch and you will get it for 10 gold. It's a really good, great quality of life, and it allows you to be a bit more flexible in dungeons, raids, PvP, etc. This also helps with the cost of stuff because, let's face it, no one really wanted to spend 1,000 gold for dual spec. It's very cool, but if you're a druid, you can tank or DPS, but they needed a healer, and it's like, fuck, my dual spec is healer. And it's like, well, I just was unlucky to go into the wrong spec, I guess, that kind of deal. Whereas if it's like shamans, it's like DPS or heal. So you may as well have your off spec as healer so that you can always fill that role. And if it's a tank, it's one of them things you just can't do anything about it. That's where the kind of disappointment lies, I think, with dual spec. But what a good quality of life change is in Cataclysm is that mages get time warp. So mages, essentially, you're not bottlenecked to bring a shaman to your raid for the heroism. Heroism being one of your biggest raid cooldowns in the entire game since its release in the Burning Crusade, giving the entire raid group, apart from when it was released in TBC, but a 30% haste increase for 30 odd seconds. This is a massive damage increase, and you are now not bottlenecked into just always bringing a shaman. You can bring a mage into the party as well, since they can do the exact same thing. I'm not sure why they gave it to mages, considering mages have so much kit already, like utility-wise. They can have amazing CC, they bring food, they bring portals to major cities after raids, they bring great damage, they bring the entire thing. They do bring a stun in Cataclysm as well with Deep Freeze if you're a Frost Mage, but I'm guessing no one's running Frost in PvE content. So yeah, it's a really good quality of life change, and it means that you aren't forced into going into that shaman only and, or going without heroism, essentially. 10-man content is more, not trivialized, more respected, I would say. So 10-man content in Wrath of the Lich King and kind of TBC. TBC, they played with the idea, but Wrath of the Lich King, they kind of made it into something more useful. But essentially, it's on the same level as 25-man. You get to choose if you do 25-man raiding or 10-man raiding. If you don't like the bigger group, you can go to 10-man raiding and get the same item level gear from these raids. Now, they might drop something a bit different. I can't quite remember. But essentially, the 10-man raids in Wrath of the Lich King are a bit looked down upon because they don't offer as good a rewards. They offer badges to some and a good piece or two from like the end boss like Lich King or Sindragosa, but apart from that, nothing really, which is quite sad. But in Cataclysm, this does change. They do make it so that all gear from 10-player and 25-man raids is the same, which is really good and really amazing for the smaller guilds out there that don't want to essentially raid lead a 25-man group, which is, in our case, our guild, which is really cool. Transmog is obviously one of the biggest things that are coming to Cataclysm. Now, Transmog, for those of you that don't know, you can mog your armor on your character to make it look as though, or as a different piece of armor, so that you look cooler, you can match your gear, stuff like that. This is where, like, some in-games, like guild events can come into play, like who has the best transmog, that kind of deal. I think it does cost quite a lot, though. It will cost quite a lot to transmog your gear in Cataclysm, so just be aware of that. It might eat up a lot more gold than you think. But I'm not too sure if you need the void storage for it, which is, again, another 100 gold, and you need to put the items in the void storage in order to transmog it, that kind of deal. But we'll see. It's going to be on the final patch of Dragonflight. of Cataclysm, so I would imagine they updated transmog quite a bit before the end of Cataclysm, so we'll just have to wait and see with that one. Soul Shards for Warlocks. Now, Soul Shards, ever since Classic, have always been in your bag. Now, they are a UI add-on. You have 3 Soul Shards underneath your health and mana, and essentially these regenerate when you use certain abilities or just passively over time, and these are your resources that you manage as a Warlock to use big spells such as Chaos Bowl or Summon Doomguard, that kind of deal. Now, previously, what Warlocks had to do in Classic, TBC and Wrath is farm Soul Shards before raid, and then that's what they used to carry into raid and had to use them for the entirety of the raid night. For Wrath of the Lich King, if you're progressing heroic bosses, you tend to actually running. You're kind of running out of Soul Shards if you're wiping constantly, because you're not killing any trash packs. You're not doing anything to gain Soul Shards, so you're running out and having to go out and find more Soul Shards to essentially top up your damage. Because if you have no Soul Shards as a demo lock, you're essentially useless in the raid, and you're just going to be pulling that like damage the same as what a level 60 rogue would do compared to your level 80 warlock with no Soul Shards. It is really shit. So it's really good that they're bringing it out of the game, and Cataclysm is bringing in the Soul Shard resource management, I would say. So that's always a good quality of life change for you warlocks out there. The Eclipse Bar. Now, what I mean by this is Boomkins have something called an eclipse. And what this eclipse does is when you are in a lunar or solar eclipse, it increases a certain damage type. So in a solar eclipse, it increases your wrath damage. In a lunar, it increases your starfire damage. Now, in Cataclysm, they added a bar which shows your progress to this eclipse. And this meant that you could proc your eclipse as and when you wanted to, rather than you have to crit in order to get this eclipse like to proc in Wrath of the Lich King. So it's no longer an RNG element, and the best Boomkins will actually be able to proc it as and when they want during certain burst phases, which is really good. And it's kind of like a mini game within the game itself, which I think is really cool, and something that Blizzard should do more with your like fast tuning and balancing. I think it's a very cool niche thing. Better rotations. Now, what do I mean by this? So Classic, let's see, in Classic raiding, you had mages press Frostbolt, and then towards the back end of Classic, you had them pressing Fireball, or like Scorch and then Fireball. Let's get it real. In TBC, you had mages pressing Arcane Blast. That's it. In Wrath of the Lich King, you have mages pressing Fireball and Living Bomb, 2 spells. In Cataclysm, you will have mages pressing a shit ton more. Fireball will still be their main like source of damage, but you can use Hot Streaks, you can use Living Bombs, you can use Living Flame or something it's called, like a ball or something, Flame Orb, I think it's called. You know, there's many different things that you can press. For Boomkin, you obviously press Wrath and Starfire, and that's the way that it's always been since Classic. In Cataclysm, you have a resource, which is your Eclipse, and then you can manage it with wild mushrooms as well. So these wild mushrooms you detonate at certain times, and they do damage in an area on the floor. And you're managing a lot more things. Plus, with your Star Surge, you're throwing that in now. So the rotation on pretty much every single class has increased. And what this means is it's more engaging, in my opinion. You're not just standing there spamming Frostbolt. You have 7 Frostbolts on your action bar and that's all you're pressing. No, you're not falling asleep at your keyboard anymore. You're having to actually learn your rotation and power through it, which is really, really cool. With regards to this, some people might obviously like the very simplistic rotation, but in my honest opinion, it can get very stale very quickly for obvious reasons. It really isn't engaging. There needs to be more engagement when you are raiding and doing damage and stuff. And what I like about Cataclysm is the raid bosses aren't simple. They are actually a bit of a challenge. Like, we're a very casual guild, my guild, but we still managed to do quite a few like bosses on heroic, and managed to get the Lich King down last week, which is really cool and really exciting for our guild. Like I said, we're very casual, But the bosses in Cataclysm are a little bit of a step up. They're Lich King level. So you actually spend a bit of time, progressing them and throwing your, everything at them. But as long as you're having a good time, it doesn't matter. Unless you're like a race to world first type of guild, it really won't bother you, will it? Like, it's crazy that some people actually hate the fact that there's more mechanics in boss fights than there are, like, abilities that you have to press in the boss fight itself. So, like, with Patchwork, essentially it's a tank and spank. Tanks just need to make sure that they're high on threat, and that's it. You're good to go. You're just tanking him, and you're pressing your Frostbolt rotation. Like, it's crazy. For Thaddeus, essentially, if you get a negative debuff, you go to the left of him. If you get a right, or a positive, you go to the right of him. And he switches it every 20 seconds. That's it. That's the mechanic in Classic. It's not fun. Whereas, I don't really know any Classic or Cataclysm mechanics. The ones that I'm going to go for are the ones in Dragon Soul. I'm pretty sure the ones that I can remember is there's a Nyalotha type guy. I forget what they're called. But essentially they're a minion of N'Zoth or something. The octopus-looking motherfuckers. He summons like these slimes, and each slime has a different effect. So one of them increases your casting speed, one of them increases damage done, and one of them increases healing taken, something like that. And he spawns multiple of them. And it's your job to dictate which ones to kill first. And, it's out of like 6 different colours. You kill this one first, this one first, this one first. And there's like a priority list. And then for a boss later on in that fight, Spine of Deathwing's actually a good one. So the Spine of Deathwing, you're on the back of a dragon. If you all move to one side, the weight is not evenly distributed. So he will spin and instantly kill you all, throwing you off of his back. So you have to make sure you're evenly distributed whilst killing some tentacles. And then one of the mobs that you have essentially eats the oozes that spawn on his back. And once that gets to 9 stacks, it detonates and you have to kill the... it's not a breastplate because it's not a breastplate, like a plate just on his back, essentially. And that's how you progress the fight. It's really cool. There's multiple mechanics and it's actually enjoyable. You are fighting on a dragon's back. It's very cool. But yeah, a lot of Classic players kind of just want these very simple mechanics. I can kind of understand why, if like you're kind of AFK in the brain sometimes, like just standing there and wanting to just chill. But in terms of actually enjoyment of the game, I think a lot more people enjoy the mechanics of the game and actually being more invested in it and giving their all. There's a lot more satisfaction in actually fighting these bosses, unlike the ones in Classic TBC and Wrath of the Lich King for the most part. So, I don't know. I think a lot of people are put off by the mechanics in Raid because it starts to get a bit more retail-y. I will give them that. But at the same time, it's a very simple and watered-down version of retail mechanics. Like, if you watch the Race to World first, like Fyrak Mythic, I couldn't even tell you what's going on. They had to dodge some beams. They couldn't let some seeds get hit by the beams, otherwise they would instant wipe. They had to heal some ads to heal a Mirdrasil. There was a shit show going on. And that's like 3 mechanics out of 20 or something. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why a lot of people hate on Cataclysm. I think it's because a lot of people just remember it not being enjoyable. And the people that I've certainly spoke to have said that it's because either a guild disbanded at the time or, a friend quit. And I think it's mostly down to having negative memories, not of the expansion itself, but around that time in the expansion, like in WoW's history. So they're immediately like, oh, it's because Cataclysm was shit. Well, no, it's because something shit happened, like your friend quit playing World of Warcraft, or, like your guild just disbanded in Cataclysm, that kind of deal. The expansion wasn't shit itself, it had good content. Dragon Soul is a very good raid. Bastion of Twilight is a decent raid. Like, there's multiple things, but it's just one of them things. Like, it happened at a poor time and you just associate that expansion with, it being shit, essentially, in that time of your life. I think people will come around to Cataclysm once they start playing it. I would like to hope that people actually attempt to play it first rather than just go, nope, it's shit, not even going to attempt to play it. Now, this will carry on. Wrath or Classic World of Warcraft will carry on through the expansions. They'll go to Mists of Pandaria next. Then they'll go to Warlords of Draenor. Then Legion. Then Battle for Azeroth. And then so on and so forth. Now, the reason that they'll do it is because, yes, it's a good way to get some money, as always. They are a business, after all. But secondly, people who play WoW now never experienced a lot of the expansions. The two people that I play with in my arena team both started back in Battle for Azeroth. Unfortunate place to start. I know, it's one of them things. But they both did. This was 2018. And if you think about it, they have experienced a toddler's amount of years in terms of World of Warcraft. Because they've experienced Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands, and Dragonflight. That's 3 expansions, yeah? They missed out on Legion, Warlords of Draenor, Mists of Pandaria, what was the other? Cataclysm, Wrath of the Lich King, TBC, and Classic. That's 7 expansions that they've missed out on. So, the main point I'm trying to make here is, it gives the people who are starting to play WoW a chance to experience these expansions the way that they were, which is really, really good. And for those who did play the expansion, it's all about the nostalgic trip. Let's face it. Because I'm going into Cataclysm thinking, yeah, this is actually going to be really cool. When I first heard that Classic was going to be released back in 2018 or whenever it was, 2017, I was like, that's going to be so cool. I never got to play it. I'm going to play the fuck out of Classic WoW because it's something I never got to experience and I really want to enjoy the World of Warcraft experience, the Classic experience. Same with TBC. But when Wrath hit, I was like, okay, I kind of know Wrath, but I have my first memories of World of Warcraft in Wrath of the Lich King. So killing the Lich King was one of my first memories. So doing that in the last week brought back so much nostalgia, and I was so happy that I could do that. And that might be what other people might experience in Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor. You don't know when people have their best memories of World of Warcraft, so people can relive them. And if we're going through each expansion, everyone gets the chance to do that. Because if you look at Classic Era, sure, it's still like decently populated, but those who went back to test it out, most of them didn't want to carry on in that era of World of Warcraft. Because it's just, once you've killed everything, there is an end. There's no enjoyment from it. It's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll run around Eastern Plaguelands again, farming some arcane crystals. And it's like, do I really want to do that? Not really. I do want to do some arenas on retail. I want to do a raid on Wrath. You know, you want to hop to and from every single expansion. And this is what it's giving you the freedom to do. Now, I think that people should give Cataclysm a good go. Because I think it is not as bad of a expansion that people think it is. I think it's still very much like Classic compared to retail. Everyone says that it's like, oh my god, this is when it became retail. It really isn't. The world got a revamp. They basically just updated quests to make it better, to give it actual story content in your questing, you know, rather than, oh, my wife's like missing, can you go find her? And you find Mancrick's wife halfway down the Barrens, and it's like, oh, yeah, you go back and tell him, oh, she's dead. And it's like, oh, cool, here's some XP, here's some silver, thanks for telling me. You know, what fun's that? You actually get some, you know, flesh and bones in the quest, which is always good and wanted, in my honest opinion. What I'm trying to say is Cataclysm got so much bad press back in the day and when it was announced now, that I don't think it deserved. And I think it deserves a second chance. And people in their own little communities that they are now, hopefully none of them disband, whether it be a guild or, you know, if you're just hopping from pugging to like pugging, then hopefully you enjoy it a lot more. Because the understanding of Cataclysm is going to be very much up there. We're going to have, you know, what's best in slot, what's your best gear, what's your best talents to pick, all of that shit. We're going to have it all before the expansion's even released, so people can really go for it if they want to mid-max stuff, or people can just chill and experience the expansion for how they want. But I think people need to experience it. I think people will see that it is a lot different to what they imagine it like it was back in 2010. So we'll see. But that is it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. Do check out all of the socials down below. Constant stuff happening all over there. But thank you all very much once again. And go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.